Crime is not an alien force coming from the planet Pluto. It's nurtured, it's grown here.
The courses showed me an ideal world, but the practicum showed me reality.
I believe that people are more than the worst thing they've ever done.
These are things that, had I not been in this program, I would be completely blind to in the legal field. I would just assume it's this utopia.
I asked them, why do people commit crime? And we put a whole list up on the board. Why do people commit crime? And then I asked the other question, why don't people commit crime? And we put that list on the board. And then at the end of the class, I asked them to pull out their card and say, do you still think the same thing?
It's definitely a great program. And it's really wholesome because it's like, I feel like I'm being treated like an equal when there's no obligation for you to be doing that. My name is Nimra Berkey. I am a third-year human justice major at the University of Regina, and I am also the president of the UR Restorative Justice Club. When I was still in high school, I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do in university, so I remember I was kind of looking at the course catalog, trying to figure out something I was interested in, but I wasn't sure what. But then I found the Human Justice Program. And the Human Justice Program under the Justice Studies Department, it encapsulated different fields of study. So it had social studies, it had political science, it also had criminology, which is something that I really wanted, and a little bit of law. So it was just this holistic package in a sense, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to pursue an education in different fields and to do courses that I never really had the chance to do before. So far with our conference, the first undergraduate restorative justice conference, I'm seeing a huge change in just I initially wasn't sure if I was going to stay in the program because, again, I didn't know anything about it. But as I started taking more courses and I found that a lot of the material I was learning about aligned with my personal interests and goals in life, I found myself committed to the program, and now I absolutely love it.
I was initially drawn to the Human Justice Study program at the University of Regina because I was coming from criminology at McGill University in Quebec. And when I had moved here to Regina, the program was the closest to what I had already started my degree in. And I was pursuing law enforcement, and I was really drawn to the fact that the program offered practicums. And I really value that practical experience. Academia is really important, obviously, but being able to have the tools to actually use what you learn and developing those networks in the community are bar none. I think that's what elevates our program above others.
The practicum has changed my perspective dramatically, I'd say, on justice, because before the practicum, justice was a very narrow term. It was just kind of like, okay, so it involves criminals and offenders, and if the offender does something wrong, then the state ends up taking action against them, and it was just step by step by step, no problems, this is how it works. But then after I did my practicum, I did my practicum at Pro Bono Law Saskatchewan, and it was an amazing experience, but also really insightful because I was working alongside lawyers and clients, and I was able to see that the law doesn't work like you'd expect. The courses showed me an ideal world, but the practicum showed me reality. It showed me what the textbooks look like translated into the real world. And I realized that there is that kind of disconnect. And that really opened my eyes, but I'm grateful for that experience because when I realized areas of where the law was, in a sense, failing, I was able to go back to the classroom and figure out why. Why is that the case? Because the classroom is where we gather that research, it's where we gather that knowledge, it's where we ask the questions. And so I took advantage of that and I went back to the classroom and I thought, well, why is that the case? Why is it failing? What can we do? What do we lack?
In our department, we have a practicum component, and practicum is essential part of the department. So whatever we teach as a theory, then now you're working as a practicum student in the Ministry of Justice. So you are learning how those theories are practiced in there. My name is Asad, and I am one of the faculty members at the Department of Justice Studies, and I teach restorative justice, conflict transformation, and also criminology theory. So whenever you work in those practicum places, it gives you more, whatever we teach in different classes, that from just 100 to all courses that we have, you find more applied meaning of those works. So that's one way. Another way that we include experiential learning is in our teaching methodology. For example, when I teach, I try to include multiple modalities of learning. I include some Lego, I include some toys and games, board games as a part of teaching. They learn by doing. So sometimes I have some paintings, like I ask them, think about restorative justice, what comes to your mind? So they will paint something that explain what is restorative justice to them. They draw something. So that's experiential learning, and they share with each other. And then these Lego sets that I have, I ask them make something that whenever you think of labeling theory, what comes to your mind? So they will make something with the Lego, and then I will teach them. So we include, by and large, in our department, we have most of the faculty members, they have this understanding of students' need with regard to, because people learn differently. Some people are, they learn by reading. Some people are more visual, they learn by watching and seeing. And some people are more tactile, or they learn by doing things. So these multiple modalities of learning, in my understanding, if we can include, that's more experiential than just Socratic method where a professor is just reading slides, reading from books, or just lecturing.
I'm Linda Yadlowski. I'm currently a restorative practitioner with the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces with the Government of Canada. And I'm a graduate of Human Justice Studies from the University of Regina. I got my degree in 1998. I would say it was the entire program that influenced my path in my career. When I look back and I think about it specifically, I took a counseling class, and I think it was with Hirsch Greenberg. And that class had a big impact on me because it gave me the skills to be able to talk to people and to listen to people. Now, of course, over the last 25 years, I've honed those skills through policing, working with victim services, working in open and closed youth facilities, and now in my current job, working with class members of a sexual misconduct class action lawsuit. So learning those skills was foundational for being able to just listen and be empathetic and respond in a trauma-informed manner, considering the person. So it's very client-centric. So restorative justice is all about being client-centered, being trauma-informed, considering one's culture, religion. All of those things were part of how to talk to people in this counseling class.
My name is Hirsch Greenberg, and I'm an instructor emeritus with the Department of Justice Studies. I've always been interested in justice, and I had 30 years experience in the field prior to coming to the Department of Justice Studies, or what's called now the Department of Justice Studies. It was still called, when I started in 2001, the School of Human Justice. And I became involved as a practicum coordinator. I think largely because of my work in the field over the years, I knew most of the programs, justice programs in the province. In many ways, what we're really talking about is injustice and how to achieve justice in a society that has a bias in its application of justice. On an individual basis, it's fine. I mean, if it's not that people aren't committing crimes, it's the differential treatment for people of color, and not just Indigenous people. If you go to Toronto, for example, Black people suffer exactly the same kinds of discrimination. How can we make police departments more sensitive to it? And one of the things that we find in studying how education begins to change perspectives is that police officers with a university degree are less likely to be confrontational. They're less likely to try and use force. Not that they shouldn't, because issues of safety do occur. There's no question about that. But the first step isn't always to the most extreme. And education helps provide that kind of perspective. What does community policing look like versus what Adam policing now, where police are just assigned to communities based on shift work, rather than having a police officer or a group of police officers that are familiar with the community, that can understand the dynamics of what's going on. Not all people who grow up poor are criminals, but just because they're poor, you can't treat them all the same. And sadly, that's kind of what happens. And there's issues of racism and economic issues and so on. So education helps provide that perspective and begins to give you some insight into an individual's behavior. So we begin to see that if you live in despair and hopelessness, the behavior is understandable, and be able to sort of speak to that versus, the negative behavior.
I'm Nick Jones. I've been a professor in the Department of Justice Studies now since July of 2006. My primary research areas have been genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, restorative justice, and policing, focusing more on Indigenous policing. My experience in doing my doctoral research in Rwanda really caused me to take a look at my own paradigmatic view of the world. And it really caused me to call into question, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think the way that I think? And it was, I've always said the research was kind of cool, but the whole experience was really life-changing in terms of being more open to and altering my perceptions of other perspectives. For me, the biggest one was sitting in and observing the Gacaca courts. Gacaca they did it every weekend. So, and one court session would run from 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock. It was Rwandan time. So we would get there expecting it to start at 8, and it would kind of start whenever it started. But then it would also finish whenever it finished. And we saw a murder case that took about 8 hours. I can't even imagine that in a Canadian court. I'd say there were probably 75, 80 people that were in attendance that day. And when it was all done, the person was going to be released from prison later that day. And pretty much everybody in the crowd stopped and shook his hand and said, "Welcome back. We'll see you later." And it was kind of an amazing reintegration ceremony that took place right in front of us. And I compare that to the context here where people get let out of the Regina Correctional Center and they're dropped off downtown, and we still push them out and segment them from the rest of us, and there isn't that welcoming reintegrated part back to it. So, and it was after that when I came back and finished that, and then I moved to Saskatchewan. I did my doctorate at the University of Calgary, and then I got the job here in Regina. And then moving here, that experience in Rwanda started me really down the path of looking at issues in criminal justice around Indigenous people. Looking at the international community who was drawing criticisms about, well, there's no lawyers, well, the judges aren't trained, well, this, well, that. And my experience of sitting there was, but it worked. Like, it worked for them. And really that was sort of start of for me, kind of an awakening of the impact of colonial practices. Because in the aftermath of the genocide, there were basically no social institutions. And so the Rwandans went back to Rwandan dispute resolution mechanisms, which was the Gacaca, their way, their culture, their approach to dealing with conflict. And I think for me, when we talk about the Indigenous issues here in Canada, we've done the same thing. We've taken a westernized system of justice and imposed it upon people to whom it was foreign. They don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it's not ingrained in their culture. It's not how they would approach doing these things. And for us to impose that upon them and expect them to embrace it, to me, makes no sense. It's shifted for me looking at why aren't we, one, respectful of what they're doing, but two, not actually looking at what they're doing and seeing if that can't work for us and incorporate a different perspective into what we're already doing. And for me, that was kind of the blend of criminal and restorative justice, all in one sort of context. I show pictures from being in Rwanda, and they're like, "That's a courtroom?" Yep, that's a courtroom. And those are the judges. And what are their qualifications? In Kinyarwanda, it's Inyangemugayo. And I asked the very westernized question. Okay, so what are their qualifications? Well, Inyangamu Gayu translates into person of integrity. That was their qualification. The other members of the community saw them as people with integrity who could fairly assess and look at this stuff. I'm like, you know, there's something to it. And having that experience was great. And now I can bring that experience to the classroom. I tell all the students I'm not there to change their mind. I'm just asking them to be open. Like, be open enough to consider alternatives. We all bring our history to the classroom. Every single one of us comes into a classroom with our entire life history behind us. And that life history is going to shape how we think, what we feel, the directions we want to go. Even teaching criminological theory, we start day one. I ask them, why do people commit crime? And we put a whole list up on the board. Why do people commit crime? And then I ask the other question, why don't people commit crime? And we put that list on the board. And then at the end of the class, I ask them to pull out their card and say, do you still think the same thing? Because we've now gone through and we've talked about 15 different theories of why people commit crime, but we all came in with a predisposed idea and a predisposed answer. So now that you've heard this and you've seen this and you've heard the research on this, has that changed how you think about it? And so I think in the context that we live in Canada and particularly in Saskatchewan, we would be very remiss not to really take a look at the Indigenous issues and the social justice issues that are underlying them, again, within the focus and relating to the field of criminology and criminal justice. But we know it goes broader than that, and those things are very important. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to experiential learning.
I am Otto Dreger, Professor Emeritus of Social Work and Human Justice. A colleague of mine and I started social work education at the university in 1972. And while we were involved with that, the Criminology and Corrections Association of Saskatchewan asked the university to develop a justice program, a criminal justice. And because I had background in the province in the justice field, they asked me to take responsibility for that. So I became the person that developed the Human Justice Degree Program. And that was in 1974, 75 is when we got started. At that time, I was the Dean of the Faculty of Social Work, which later became the Faculty of Social Work and Human Justice. Why the program was started, actually the Saskatchewan Criminology Association asked the University of Regina to start a criminal justice program, a criminology program. And when they asked me to develop that, my impression was that to develop a justice program, criminology was a sociologically based program, and that it was too narrow. It needed to be much broader. So it needed to be an interdisciplinary program that included forensic psychology and sociology and law, and the police needed to be part of the justice. They needed to know more about civil rights, and civil rights people needed to know more about the importance of the rule of law. And so we developed an interdisciplinary degree program called Human Justice. And we called it Human Justice because the word human justice, nobody knew what it was, because we didn't want it to be categorized into any one particular system. So we developed our own concept of human justice, that which was interdisciplinary and interprofessional, because this was a combination of not just academic, but also of the professionals. So that is why human justice began as part of the social work faculty, because it was a professional program, basically, not only an academic program. Having a professional program was important because there was a lot of very good work that was being done in the province of Saskatchewan in terms of justice. It was based on the objective of integrating people who had offended back into the community in a positive kind of a way. And it had moved away from a punishment model for a long time under T.C. Douglas and others. And so, and therefore, because there were a lot of people that were practicing in the justice field, in criminology, or in the criminal justice, in policing, and so forth, but they didn't have the professional base or an academic base. So we thought it was very important for them to be pulled in, and in the beginning, people that had practiced for a long time in some of these areas would get certain credits because of their practice already. But then they would get both the academic and the practical, so that they would then be truly professionals in the field. One of the biggest challenges in the program, I think, were all the various categories in the justice field had their own identity and their own view of the world. And I think the challenge for us was then to assist these various parts in the justice field to see the importance of each other. And that, I think, was, and it was not with regard to hostility, it was an engagement, and that was, to me, the biggest challenge. How do I feel about the present? I was at the conference, the 50-year conference, and I just was really overjoyed by the kind of a program that was. And the way Assad is just tremendous in terms of, you couldn't have a better person taking the thrust of the justice field, in my view, than Assad. And also to have all those students there and involvement is exactly the kind of stuff that I was hoping that it would happen. And to see what has happened in these 50 years, I was just overjoyed. I was just really very overjoyed. Yeah.
It's definitely a great program. And like even right now, while working on this conference, one of the professors, both Dr. Assad and Dr. Gasek, the amount of times whenever we're in meetings, they'll always ask me, Nimra, are you okay with the way things are proceeding? And it's nice to know because they don't need to ask me. Like they'll be talking about budgetary things that I'm like, I have no stake in. It's not like I don't even get what's happening. But they'll still want to be like, Nimra, are you okay with what's happening? And sometimes they'll say, I don't really know what's happening, but whatever you guys decide on is great. And they're like, oh, let's re-explain it for you. And so they'll essentially dumb it down for me.
That's so awesome.
And it's really wholesome because it's like I feel like I'm a part of this. I feel like I'm being treated like an equal when there's no obligation for you to be doing that. So
That's
it's
great.
amazing.
The key qualities of our department, if I want to summarize, is this department has a lot of focus on relationships with each other. As a faculty member with our students, the way we do also interact with our colleagues, even our office administrative persons, we see each other in a more relational lens. That a lot of time in academic setting, you will see people are doing the work in their own, and they're all in their own boxes. There's hardly any interaction. It's one of the beautiful qualities we have in our department. Second important quality we have is that we deeply care about our students. When we teach, our relationship with our students are very strong, and we pay attention to their needs, and we do everything possible to make sure that those needs are addressed and met. And then finally, our department, you see most of our faculty members, they're connected with the community, so whatever they're learning, it's not just a theory, it's like a kind of praxis, a combination of theory and practice. In my class that I teach, in the classes that other professors they teach, they try to include theory and practice together. So, and then also their involvement in the community is very strong. So relationship with each other, relationship with students, and our relationship with community, those are essentials in our department. So we also found during our strategic planning meeting that faculty members, all of them agreed that changing our name from Justice Studies to Criminology will be more aligned with our current work, future work, and will be also aligned with the mainstream scholarly work that we are in at this moment, both in Canada and also globally across the world. And then finally, we felt that this is the future in terms of branding the department in that way. We will attract more students and the students who are taking our courses, it will be more relevant to them. They don't have to explain what is justice studies. Criminology, people know the department very well, so it will be also good for students as well. So one of the dreams I have is having this partnership with justice agencies, so chief of police, chief judge, and then court. All of them can come together here, and then community members. It's a kind of learning hub. And then lastly is the conference that we started, first undergraduate conference. We would like to do it on a biannual basis. So hopefully the next conference will be in 2027, and then the third one will be hopefully in 2029. So hopefully that will continue. So if those future students from high schools who are here listening to me, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a police officer, if you want to be a chief judge, or if you want to work for any government agencies, including civil services, our department has extraordinary amount of scholars and skills and knowledge and classes. If you take it, it will prepare you to be a better police officer, to be a better lawyer, to be a better judge, and to be a better community member, and to be a better civil servant of the country.